What's up, squad? It's your Squid here at Anxious Squid Productions. Half a century ago, Neil Armstrong's historic "one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind" comment as he stepped from the LEM onto the moon's surface was watched by more than 600 million people. I wouldn't mind views like that. 1/5 of all humankind at the time. That 1/5 of all humans almost didn't see this historic event though. And today, we're talking about the tool that made it possible for the telecast quality to be so good. We're talking about the Parkes Observatory Telescope in Western New South Wales, Australia, commonly referred to as the Dish by Australians, and we're going to talk about just how pivotal it would become to the mission's success. These names and businesses alongside me just here are the financial supporters of the channel, and if you wanted to become one yourself, you could. I like money, and turning some of yours into mine on a monthly basis would be pretty cool, because then I can spend it on stuff. You know how money works. It's a thing. Links for how to turn some of your money into my money are in the description, but before you click any of those, let's get through the jingle and the rest of this advertisement and get into the Aussie history, shall we? We shall. Once again, thanks to everyone for clicking on my video today, fam. The content playing above me and to my right here, hopefully by about the time I'm saying this, was one small step for man and one giant leap for mankind. And the footage was taken at 12:56 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time on Monday, the 21st of July, 1969. 600 million people, or 1/5 of mankind at the time, watched Neil Armstrong's first steps on the moon on that day 52 years ago. Incidentally, I started writing this script on the day of the 52nd anniversary, so there you go, right? Only took a month or so to get done. Good hustle, Squid. But back to 1969. 3 tracking stations were receiving the signals from the men on the moon simultaneously. They were the CSIRO's Parkes Radio Telescope, the Honeysuckle Creek Tracking Station outside of Canberra, and NASA's Goldstone Station in California. The signals were relayed to Mission Control at Houston. During the first few minutes of the broadcast, NASA had been alternating, right, going between the 2 signals from its 2 stations at Goldstone and Honeysuckle Creek, searching for the best quality images that they could then, turn into video or broadcast. When they switched to the Parkes pictures, they were of such superior quality that NASA remained with the Parkes TV pictures for the remainder of the 21.5-hour telecast. But like I said, right, that almost didn't happen. And since viewers of the channel will note, I don't like to discuss anything without first zooming out and taking a big old panoramic view of all of the context we can, or all of the context we need in order to explain whatever it is the thing is that we're explaining is, right? Let's pan outward and give it a go this time for this video as well, shall we? In late 1968, NASA had asked for the dish in Parkes to be used in the Apollo 11 mission. The giant telescope would be the prime receiving station for the reception of telemetry and TV from the surface of the moon. Using it also provided extra gain in the signal strength from the moon. I know that's pretty jargony, but what this meant was that during the tightly scheduled first moonwalk, the astronauts would not have to spend time setting up a huge, big, laborious, large antenna to get the necessary signal strength. A good example I can think of for my sport-loving friends or sport-loving followers of the channel, right? Think about how in baseball, when a deep ball that almost made it to a home run but didn't quite, like it hit the wall and bounced off again. Think about how it gets returned to home plate. The outfielder throws the ball to an infielder who throws it to the catcher at home plate, instead of the outfielder breaking his back and losing his accuracy to try and throw it to home himself. They make a couple of shorter distance throws to ensure accuracy. Same deal with the TV reception back then, in a sense, right? Instead of Neil and Buzz trying to shoot the signal from the moon with a really big antenna they'd have to construct, i.e. breaking their arm with throwing, and shoot it to America, and potentially or missing or being too weak, they shortened the initial distance and they threw to Parkes in the outback. Same sort of thing, but with space lasers, not baseballs, right? The analogy makes sense in my head at least. Let me know in the comments if it didn't to you. In a nutshell, what it meant was that they could send their signal from the moon to the dish, and then from the dish to the people of the world. The then director of the Parkes Observatory, John Bolton, insisted on a single, solitary, one-line contract with NASA, right? He didn't mess about in the slightest. The CSIRO Radio Physics Division agreed to support the Apollo 11 mission in whatever means necessary to ensure its success. That was it. At 6:17 a.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time on the 21st of July, astronauts Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin landed their LM Eagle on the Sea of Tranquility. It was still some 7 hours before the moon would have risen high enough to be seen from Parkes, though. The schedule required the astronauts to rest before attempting the moonwalk, by which time the moon would have been high overhead at Parkes. However, Armstrong departed from the original plan, opting for an immediate moonwalk instead, as soon as they hit the ground. To the astronomers at Parkes, right, it looked like it was a disaster. It looked like as though the moonwalk would be over before the moon even rose over Parkes, right? However, it took the astronauts such a long time to don their spacesuits and depressurize the LM cabin that as they left the module, by a stroke of luck, the moon was just rising over Parkes. It seemed as though they would get the signals after all, right? However, trouble loomed quite suddenly. While fully tipped over on its side, staring at the horizon, waiting for the moon to rise instead of further up, right? The telescope was struck by a series of severe 110 kilometre per hour gusts of wind. If I remember during the edit, I'll put a miles per hour up there as well. Should have in the script, didn't. Oh well. Winds that strong hitting the basically horizontal dish made the entire control room shudder as if it were a sailboat only flimsily anchored to the ground. The telescope was slammed back against its zenith axis gears to the point that some automated hydraulic systems broke, and the thing had to be moved manually from that point forward if the wind moved it and adjusted things itself. This was a dangerous situation, right? Threatening the integrity of the telescope structure and therefore the ability to receive the signal and therefore the mission as a whole. Fortunately, cool heads prevailed, and as the winds abated, Buzz Aldrin activated the TV camera just in time as the moon rose into the telescope's field of view and tracking began without any scientific failures. Using a less sensitive off-axis detector, Parkes was able to receive the TV pictures just as the LM TV camera was switched on. Less than 9 minutes later, the moon had risen into the full view and the full field of view of the Parkes telescope's main detector. Because Parkes was a larger telescope, it captured signals and so therefore produced better pictures, right? Houston switched to Parkes and remained with those pictures for the rest of the 21.5-hour broadcast, as I said. Parkes staffer Neil Fox Mason, though, who was seated at the control desk, drove the telescope without being allowed to once, not even once, turn around and have a glimpse and see the incoming pictures on the TV monitor. Due to the breakages on the automated hydraulics caused by the strong winds, it was essential for him to monitor the tracking of the telescope at all times, in case the winds picked up again and threatened the signal reception. The weather remained bad at Parkes, with the telescope operating well and truly outside safety limits for the entire duration of the moonwalk, under his watchful engineer's eye. Let's hold the story here for a second though, right? What a frickin' legend Neil Fox Mason is. Imagine working on something for a number of years, having it be the absolute pinnacle of your field's collective knowledge and expertise, and then not being able to see the result, not being able to see it come to fruition because you were watching some crack in aluminum while your mate sat next to you and watched the screen. What a legend. Kudos to you, Foxy boy. Well done, mate. The signals were sent from the moon to Parkes and onward to Sydney via specifically installed microwave links. From there, the TV signal was split. One signal went to the Australian Broadcasting Commission, the ABC, sort of like the equivalent to PBS for my American viewers. It's the public broadcasting studio, right? It went to their studios at Gore Hill for distribution to the Australian TV networks. The other went to Houston for the inclusion in the international telecast for the rest of the world. Fun fact, because the international broadcast signal had to travel halfway around the world from Sydney to Houston via the Intelsat geostationary communications satellite over the Pacific Ocean, there was a 300 millisecond delay introduced to the signal. Australian audiences, like my parents, therefore witnessed the moonwalk and Armstrong's historic first step some 0.3 seconds before the rest of the world. Following the success of the mission, the NASA Administrator Thomas O. Paine sent the following message of commendation to the Australian Minister for Education and Science, who would later go on to be Prime Minister, Mr. Malcolm Fraser. I wish to express my sincere appreciation to you and to the Commonwealth Scientific Industrial Research Organisation for making available the Parkes facility during the Apollo 11 missions. Its participation and spectacular performance provided the entire world with a chance to experience with astronauts Armstrong and Aldrin this historic event. And that was that. You may be wondering, as it is often the way with a lot of huge industrial projects like this, was the dish just discarded after the Apollo missions? And to that I say heck no. In fact, it is still in use for various scientific purposes today, in addition to being a tourist attraction for nerdy folks like myself with an interest in space and history and both of those things combined, like space history, right? It started operating in 1961, but only its basic structure has remained unchanged since then, right? The surface, control system, focus cabin, receivers, computers, and cabling have all been upgraded, some parts many times over, to keep the telescope at the cutting edge of radio astronomy. The telescope is now 10,000 times more sensitive than when it was first commissioned over half a century ago. Its large dish surface makes the Parkes telescope very sensitive, and accordingly, it is ideally suited to finding pulsars. Pulsars are rapidly spinning neutron stars, roughly the size of a small city, by the by. Over half of the more than 2,000 known pulsars to all of humanity have been found using the Parkes telescope in the outback of Australia. The introduction of a multi-beam receiver, a revolutionary instrument designed and built by the CSIRO, enabled Parkes to be used for large-scale surveys of the sky. These surveys include the HI Parkes All-Sky Survey that found over 2,500 new galaxies in our local region, and the Galactic All-Sky Survey that successfully mapped the hydrogen gas in our galaxy in high detail. Most recently, in 2018-19, the telescope supported NASA's Canberra Deep Space Communication Complex in receiving data from Voyager 2 as the spacecraft crossed into interstellar space for the first time ever. Interstellar space! And we picked it up on the dish. And that's not all, right? There are future missions booked in for the dish as well, and if all goes well, it will provide ground station support to the Houston-based Initiative Machines Group for the multiple lunar missions it is planning with NASA over the next 5 years. Australia's CSIRO, which I should probably have mentioned at the start of the video, actually. It stands for the Commonwealth Scientific and Industrial Research Organisation. The CSIRO owns and operates the 64-metre telescope. They announced they'd struck a deal with the Intuitive Machines in early July, making the Parkes facility the largest and most sensitive receiving ground station for the upcoming missions as well. At this point in the video, regular viewers of the channel are probably shocked to see that I've made it over 10 minutes into a history video without mentioning a single Aboriginal person or a single Aboriginal community. Most of my videos try to take into account their experience, and I've actually got some happy news on that front for a change, right? Unlike many other scientific endeavours in lands that were once colonial outposts, the dish in Parkes is looked upon fondly by the local Aboriginal people, and the white Australians took their opinions into account when building it, unlike the telescope being built in Hawaii at the moment. But that's a whole different conversation. You should go and see a different YouTuber about that. Anton Petrov has some really good videos. Check him out. Anyway, local Wiradjuri elders gave the 64-metre telescope the name Marayang, which represents the sky world, where a prominent creator spirit of the Wiradjuri dreaming, named Bayami, I think it is, or Bayami. That's where he lives, right? So if you'd like to learn more about Bayami, I'll leave a link for you in the description for someone whose story it is to actually tell, so they can tell you. But that's a pretty awesome legacy for some big chunk of metal randomly plonked in the outback, don't you think? Anyway, That's the story of the dish and how it saved the moon landing mission from failure. The telecast of the mission was arguably the most important part, right? If the Russians had never seen the moon landing, they might have gone on to say it never happened, or that it was faked, right? Hell, even people with access to all of the information humanity has ever compiled, now, today, these days, believe that it didn't happen just because they're scientifically illiterate, even with the footage, right? But I digress. This was the story of how Australia saved the telecast, and therefore helped save the moon landing. As always, if this was the first time you've seen a video of mine, or you're usually a fan of my reaction videos, and this is the first one from my history playlist that you've given a chance, have a poke around, watch a few more, then hit the subscribe button if you haven't already. That would be great. It does really help me out if you hit subscribe and hit the bell and watch videos as they're uploaded. If you want to go the extra kilometre, yeah, you can. I did that deliberately. If you want to go the extra mile, right, you could join my Patreon or buy something from one of my affiliates using the code Squid or Squid with Milkman. But don't feel like you have to, right? If you've made it this far in the video, you've been forced to watch at least 2 or 3 unskippable ads on this video already, and that helps me a chunk as well as it is. You all are the real MVPs. Leave me a comment telling me what you want to hear about next, and I'll see you when I look at you. You'll see me when you look at me. Thanks for watching.